The wedding hall fell silent. Not the peaceful silence of anticipation, but the suffocating quiet of shock and pity. Sarah stood frozen at the altar, her trembling hands clutching the veil that covered her scarred face, the cruel gift left by the fire that had taken everything from her 3 years ago. She could feel 200 pairs of eyes burning into her, could hear the whispered gasps rippling through the pews. Her chest tightened. This was a mistake. She should have never agreed to this arranged marriage with a man she'd never met, a man who hadn't seen her face until this very moment when tradition demanded she lift her veil. But desperation had driven her here, her family's mounting debts, her father's illness, the weight of being their only hope. Now, standing before this stranger named Michael, she wanted nothing more than to disappear into the ground beneath her white satin shoes. Then she felt it. His hand, warm and steady, reaching toward her veil. Sarah's story hadn't always been written in scars and shame. Once, she'd been the girl who laughed too loud, who dreamed too big, who believed the world was full of endless possibilities. She'd worked at a small bakery in downtown Portland, saving every penny for culinary school, her mind brimming with recipes she wanted to create in restaurants she'd one day own. Her reflection in shop windows had been something she'd barely noticed, just another face in the crowd, unremarkable but her own. The fire had changed everything in a matter of minutes. A gas leak in her apartment building. She'd been asleep when the explosion tore through 3 floors. Sarah had woken to flames and smoke, had crawled through burning hallways helping elderly neighbors to safety. She'd gotten 5 people out before the ceiling collapsed. The firefighters found her unconscious near the stairs, her face and neck covered in third-degree burns. She survived. The doctors called it a miracle. Sarah called it a curse. The medical bills crushed her family. Her father, already struggling with heart disease, took on extra shifts that his body couldn't handle. Her mother worked 3 jobs. Sarah, unable to return to work, unable to afford the reconstructive surgeries that might restore some normalcy to her appearance, became a ghost in her own life. She stopped looking in mirrors. Stopped going outside except at night. Stopped believing in those endless possibilities. When her parents suggested the arrangement, a marriage to Michael Chen, the son of a business associate who needed to marry before his 30th birthday to claim his inheritance, Sarah had wanted to refuse. But she saw the exhaustion carved into her father's face, heard the desperation in her mother's voice. Michael's family was offering enough money to clear their debts and pay for her father's surgery. All Sarah had to do was become a wife to a stranger. She'd agreed, on one condition: Michael wouldn't see her face until the wedding day. If he wanted to back out then, she'd understand. She'd expected him to agree because it wouldn't matter, he'd be gone the moment he saw her. Now that moment had arrived, and Sarah couldn't breathe. Michael's fingers touched the edge of her veil, and she jerked backward, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Don't. Please don't." "Sarah," he said softly, his voice carrying none of the horror she'd prepared herself for. "Look at me." She couldn't. She stared at the floor, at his polished black shoes, at anything but his face. "I know you're scared," Michael continued, his hand still extended, patient. "I know what people have told you, what you've told yourself. But I need you to hear something before you run. Will you give me that chance?" Something in his tone, not pity, not disgust, but something gentle and real, made Sarah lift her eyes. Michael's face surprised her. He wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she'd imagined. His expression held kindness, yes, but also something that looked like understanding. Like pain recognized. "I was in a car accident when I was 17, Michael said, and slowly, carefully, he rolled up his left sleeve. Sarah's breath caught. His arm was covered in scars, burned scars, grafts, the unmistakable marks of reconstructive surgery. Drunk driver hit us head on. My little sister was in the car. His voice wavered. I got her out, but not before. She survived too. But for years, I hated myself for not being faster, for not protecting her better. I hated how people looked at us afterward. Like we were broken things to be pitied." Sarah's hands loosened on her veil. "I didn't agree to this marriage because of my inheritance," Michael said. "I have plenty of money. I agreed because when my mother told me about you, about what you did in that fire, how you saved 5 people, how you sacrificed yourself for strangers, I knew I wanted to meet someone that brave. Someone who understood what it meant to carry scars and still choose to live. You don't understand, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her hidden face. I'm not brave. I'm a coward who can't even show her face. Then let me help you. Michael stepped closer, his hand still outstretched. Not because you need fixing. Not because I pity you. But because I see you, Sarah. I see your courage, your strength, your beautiful heart. And I'd be honored if you'd let me see all of you. Sarah's hands shook violently. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to protect herself from the inevitable rejection. But something in Michael's eyes, a recognition, a shared understanding of pain and survival, gave her a thread of courage to grasp. Slowly, she nodded. Michael's fingers were gentle as they lifted the veil, drawing it back with reverence, as if unveiling something precious. Sarah closed her eyes, unable to watch his reaction, unable to see the moment his kindness turned to revulsion. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Michael spoke, his voice thick with emotion, "You're beautiful." Sarah's eyes flew open. Michael was smiling, but his eyes were wet with tears. His hand came up to cup her scarred cheek, his touch feather-light and unbearably tender. "How can you say that?" Sarah choked out. "How can you possibly?" "Because I see what everyone else is too blind to see," Michael interrupted, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I see the woman who ran into fire to save others. I see the daughter who sacrificed her happiness for her family. I see someone who survived hell and is still standing here, still trying, still hoping despite everything. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." Something broke inside Sarah then, not shattering, but breaking open, like dawn breaking through darkness. For 3 years, she'd believed her scars had stolen her worth, her future, her right to be seen. But Michael was looking at her without flinching, without pity, with something that felt impossibly like admiration. "I don't expect you to love me," Michael said softly. "This arrangement can be whatever you need it to be. But I hope, maybe, you'll give us a chance to know each other. To be friends. To build something real." Sarah couldn't speak past the sob in her throat, so she just nodded. And when Michael smiled, genuine and warm and full of hope, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, the possibility of a future. The wedding continued. The guests, who'd been holding their breath, released it in a collective sigh. But Sarah barely noticed them anymore. She was looking at Michael, really looking at him, seeing not just his scars but his kindness, his understanding, his unexpected grace. They said their vows with hands clasped, two scarred survivors promising to honor each other. When Michael kissed her gently at the ceremony's end, Sarah didn't hide. She stood in the light, her face uncovered, and let herself be seen. The reception was a blur of music and laughter. But the moment Sarah would remember forever came later, when she and Michael stood alone on the venue's balcony under the stars. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "For seeing me." Michael squeezed her hand. "Thank you for letting me. We're going to be okay, Sarah. Both of us. Together." And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah believed in possibilities again. Not despite her scars, but with them, proof that she had survived, had sacrificed, had loved enough to risk everything. Her scars were part of her story, but they weren't the end of it. This was just the beginning.